Welcome to Mythos AI, your source for Cliff's Notes on complex subjects. Join Anna and Phil for yet another engaging conversation.
Okay, so today we're going deep on Alan Turing.
Deep dive.
Yeah, a deep dive. We're digging into his Wikipedia page to get a better picture of this incredible guy and his impact on, well, everything.
Honestly, Turing's reach is mind-blowing when you really think about it.
And I think a lot of people just know him for, like, computers, right?
Right, like he's basically the godfather of computer science. But even that's kind of underselling it. This is a guy who was fluent in math, logic, even philosophy and biology on top of it all.
It's like he was allergic to specializing. Like most of us, find our lane, we stick to it.
Exactly. But Turing was all over the place in the best way possible. And he was finding these connections between things that, to everyone else, seemed totally separate.
Okay, so example time, because I'm already lost. You mentioned logic.
Oh, right. So, one of the huge EE things Turing tackled was this thing called the Entscheidungs problem.
The what now?
I know, it's a mouthful. Basically, it's this question about what computers can actually solve, even in theory. And this is way before computers as we know them even existed.
So he was coming up with the rules of the game before anyone knew what game they were even playing.
Exactly. He was defining the limits of what's computable, even with, infinite power, theoretically. And what he proved, which is wild, is that some problems, they can't be solved by an algorithm, period. No matter how fancy your tech gets.
So even with all our AI and supercomputers, there are things we'll never crack. Huh. That's unsettling, but also kind of cool.
It's huge. It forces us to confront the limits of logic itself. Turing was basically mapping the edges of what's knowable.
Okay, so genius-level intellect, we've established that. But where does it even come from? What was his childhood like?
So born in London, 1912. But here's the thing. His family life was kind of all over the place.
Oh, how so?
His dad worked for the Indian Civil Service, which meant bouncing back and forth between England and India a lot.
I bet that had an impact on him. Like as a kid, that's a lot of change.
For sure. Imagine being uprooted constantly. Parents often overseas because of work. So Turing and his brother, they spent a good chunk of their childhood with relatives, boarding schools. Not the most stable environment.
I can see that breeding independence, but also maybe feeling like an outsider.
Exactly. And maybe that's part of what fueled his unique way of seeing the world.
Like those experiences, as disruptive as they were, they kind of set the stage.
It's possible. But even as a kid, you couldn't miss his intelligence. His headmistress at his first school said, and I quote, "I've had clever boys and hardworking boys, but Alan is a genius."
Okay, that's not your typical report card comment. They knew he was different.
Oh, yeah. But it wasn't always easy for him. At Sherborne, that fancy secondary school he went to, they were all about the classics, the well-rounded education.
Ah, yes, that old chestnut, which usually ends up meaning you're great at nothing in particular.
Right. And here's Turing, this math and science whiz, and they're pushing him to be more well-rounded, which, looking back at all he accomplished, kind of ironic.
It's almost like the system didn't know what to do with him. Like sometimes those best schools, they don't know how to handle true brilliance.
Absolutely. They try to put a square peg in a round hole instead of letting it be extraordinary.
Speaking of extraordinary, this is where Christopher Morcom comes in, right?
Right. This friendship, it was huge for Turing. Some even think it was his first love. They connected on a whole other level, these two, pushing each other intellectually. Math, science. That was their thing.
A real meeting of the minds. Sadly, cut short.
Yeah. Morcom got sick, bovine tuberculosis, died young in 1930. Devastated Turing, obviously, but it's like it also fueled him, to honor Morcom's memory through their shared love of knowledge.
Channeling that grief into something productive.
And productive it was. Turing ends up at Cambridge University, wins this big scholarship, £80 a year, huge money then. And Cambridge, man, that place was buzzing with ideas.
Do you imagine him there, soaking it all in?
Oh, absolutely. And this is where he truly flourishes. There's this story, right? Turing, before he's even formally studied advanced calculus, he basically deduces parts of Einstein's work on his own.
Okay, now that's just showing off.
Yeah.
Like, he was speaking the universe's language already.
He just got it, intuitively. And it's this kind of thinking that lands him a fellowship at King's College, largely due to his work on something called the central limit theorem.
Wait, wasn't there something about that? Didn't he basically, accidentally replicate someone else's proof?
He did, but get this. His methods were so original, he still got the fellowship. The professors, they recognized that even though he'd proven something already known, his way of getting there, That was groundbreaking.
Like inventing a whole new way to make a cake even though someone else had already made one. The originality was undeniable.
Exactly. And this originality, it's what he brings to the Entscheidungsproblem, that problem we talked about earlier. This was a huge deal in mathematical logic, and Turing's work on it, well, it basically birthed theoretical computer science as we know it.
Okay, even I know this is important, but I gotta admit, math logic is not my forte. Break it down for me. What was the problem actually about?
Imagine you're trying to make a system right. A set of rules that can tell you with 100% certainty if any math statement is true or false. That was the big challenge, finding this foolproof way to decide, is this math legit or bogus?
So, a universal truth detector for math. Sounds ambitious.
Ambitious doesn't even cover it. And Turing, through his work on this thing he called the Turing Machine, he proved it was impossible, that there are math statements out there where no algorithm, no matter how complex, can say for sure true or false.
So even before computers exist, he's figuring out what they'll never be able to do. That's kind of wild.
It is. It's this kind of thinking that would make him, well, essential when World War II broke out.
Oh, here we go. Now things are going to get really interesting. This is where the Enigma code comes in, right?
You got it. But before we dive into wartime espionage and code breaking, we need to set the stage. Because Turing's about to step into a whole different kind of history-making role.
Okay, so picture this. It's 1939, war breaks out, and who does Britain call on? The guy who's already figured out the limits of what computers can do, even though they don't really exist yet. It's like destiny was setting Turing up for something big.
It really is. 1939, Turing gets recruited to Bletchley Park, top-secret code-breaking headquarters. Their mission: crack the Enigma code.
The Enigma code, the Nazis' secret weapon. I mean, talk about pressure.
Oh, absolutely. This was high-stakes stuff. The Enigma machine was how the German military encrypted all their communications. If the Allies could crack it, game changer.
Okay, but I've seen the movies, right? Code breakers, racing against time, pressure, all that. Was it really that dramatic?
More dramatic, probably. Bletchley Park was this intense mix of brain power, brilliant minds, all working like crazy to decipher those intercepted messages. The fate of the war could hinge on a single breakthrough.
And Turing's right there in the middle of it, using his math wizardry to outsmart the Nazis. It's like something out of a spy novel.
It really is. But Turing didn't just help break the code, he revolutionized the whole process. And one of his biggest contributions, this thing called the bomb.
The bomb. Sounds kind of ominous.
It was, for the Germans. Imagine a machine, right? But it could test thousands of Enigma settings, super fast, automatically, eliminating the duds, zeroing in on the right code.
So it was like brute forcing the Enigma, but with a bit of Turing's genius sprinkled on top.
Exactly. The bomb slashed the time it took to crack those messages, and in war, speed is everything. But Turing, he wasn't done. He set his sights on the naval Enigma.
The naval Enigma, what made that one so special?
The German Navy, they were extra cautious. More complex settings, extra layers of security, their messages, near impossible to decipher.
But not impossible for Turing, right?
Nope. Turing loved a challenge. Instead of just building a bigger, badder machine, he invented new ways of thinking about code breaking altogether. New statistical techniques, ways of analyzing patterns.
Hold on, statistics. He's using statistics to crack Nazi codes. Talk about thinking outside the box.
That was Turing. He saw the connections nobody else did. He understood that Enigma wasn't just about language, it was about patterns and probability. He even had a name for one of his techniques: Banbarismus.
Yeah.
Imagine using math and logic to predict what the Germans were going to say before they even said it.
That's some next level stuff. It's like he was playing 4D chess while everyone else was still figuring out checkers.
Exactly. And the impact, huge. Turing's work at Bletchley Park, it didn't just help win the war, it shaped the future of cryptography. Even today, his insights about code breaking and statistics are still relevant. It's amazing to think about.
Like, his brain was a weapon as powerful as any tank or plane.
Absolutely. But here's the thing. While he was busy being a war hero, shrouded in secrecy, he was also, well, dreaming up the future.
Okay, now you got to explain that one. What does that even mean, dreaming up the future?
Remember how Turing was already obsessed with the limits of what computers could do, even before the war? Well, at Bletchley, surrounded by all these code-breaking machines, he starts really fleshing out this idea. He called it the universal machine.
A universal machine. Sounds intriguing, but also kind of vague.
Right. But here's the revolutionary part. This universal machine, it wasn't just about cracking codes. It was about doing anything. Any task you could think of. If you could break it down into simple instructions, the machine could do it. Store information, process it, spit out results.
Wait a minute. He's describing computers, isn't he?
He is. Turing basically invented the blueprint for modern computing while he was busy winning World War II on the side. It's mind-blowing. In 1946, he actually wrote this paper all about a thing called the Automatic Computing Engine, or the ACE.
The ACE. Sounds like something out of a sci-fi comic.
I know, right? But it was one of the very first detailed designs for a stored program computer. Turing was light years ahead.
So, wait. He's cracking Nazi codes by day, designing the first computers by night? This guy never slept or something.
Apparently not. And get this. He wasn't just a big-picture theoretical guy. He got his hands dirty, worked on building the Manchester Mark I, one of the very first stored program computers ever made.
He went from theory to actual physical machine.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Totally. He even wrote the first programmer's manual for it. Imagine being the guy who had to write the instructions for how to use a computer for the first time in history.
That's got to be up there with writing the first dictionary or something. Just, here's how this whole computer thing works. You're welcome, world.
Exactly. But even with all that, Turing, he was also thinking about the big questions, the philosophical stuff. Like, if we can build machines that can do all this amazing stuff, what does that even mean? Can they think? Do they have consciousness?
Ah, the million-dollar question. The Turing Test. It's like the ultimate benchmark for AI even today.
Exactly. And it all goes back to Turing, this idea that if you're talking to a machine and you can't tell it's a machine, well, maybe that means something pretty profound about what it means to think.
Mind-blowing.
Oh.
But Turing, he didn't stop there. Now we're getting into, like, zebra stripes and leopard spots.
I know, right? The man had a thing for patterns. See, he was fascinated by how these intricate designs appear in nature. Like, how does a zebra get its stripes? Why does a leopard have spots? Turing thought maybe, just maybe, there were mathematical explanations for these biological mysteries.
Okay, I gotta admit, I'm struggling to connect the dots here. Computers, code breaking, now animal patterns.
That was Turing, always making these wild leaps. He dove headfirst into morphogenesis, which is basically the study of how things take shape in nature, and he started using math, differential equations specifically, to model how these patterns might emerge.
So he was saying that the same kind of math that powers computers could also explain how a zebra gets its stripes.
Exactly. It was revolutionary stuff. He was way ahead of his time.
Decades ahead, it sounds like. It's almost overwhelming how much he accomplished in such a short time.
It's tragic, really, because just as he was reaching the peak of his powers, his personal life took a dark turn. And the world, well, it wasn't ready for a mind like his.
You know, it's almost too cruel. This man who spent his life breaking codes, revealing secrets, and he becomes the victim of society, trying to keep secrets, to hide away anyone who's different.
It's a painful truth about that era. Right as Turing's changing the world of computers, asking these huge questions about intelligence itself, his own life, his identity, it becomes this dangerous secret.
Because it's the 50s, being gay is illegal in Britain.
Yeah.
And in 1952, Turing gets arrested. Gross indecency, that's what they called it, because of his relationship with another man.
Just a reminder of how far we've come, but also how much further we still have to go. Turing, war hero, genius, treated like a criminal for simply being who he was.
And the punishment, it's just awful. They gave him a choice, prison or probation, but with a catch. Hormone therapy, basically chemical castration.
It was meant to cure him, which is just a whole other level of wrong. The ignorance, the cruelty, and of course the effects were devastating, physically, emotionally. Turing was never the same.
Stripped of his security clearance, his work, his reputation, all because of who he loved. It's just, there are no words.
It's a loss that echoes even now, you know, to think what he could have done with more time, free to be himself.
And less than 2 years later, he's gone. June 7th, 1954. Alan Turing dies from cyanide poisoning, age 41. Ruled as suicide, but...
There's always that question mark hanging over it, isn't there? Was it intentional? An accident? That half-eaten apple by his bed?
It's become this whole thing, hasn't it? Like a symbol, even if we don't know for sure. But the truth is, we lost him far too soon, under the weight of such injustice. It's impossible not to wonder what if.
What if he'd been allowed to live, to work, without fear, the things he could have accomplished?
But even though he was gone, the story wasn't over. It took time, way too long, but the world started to remember, to realize what they'd taken for granted, what they'd done to him.
It's a slow process, right? Setting the record straight. But in 2009, the British government finally issued a formal apology. Prime Minister Gordon Brown called Turing's treatment appalling.
About time.
Right. And then in 2013, Queen Elizabeth II grants him a full pardon. posthumously, of course, but still a huge symbolic gesture.
From criminal to someone the Queen herself wants to clear the name of. What a journey.
And it didn't stop there. His case, it sparks a movement. The Alan Turing law gets passed in 2017. Pardons for thousands of men convicted under those same awful laws.
So even in death, he helped bring about some justice.
His legacy, it just keeps giving, not just the computers, the code breaking, the biology, but what he represents. Resilience. The power of a brilliant mind, even when the world tries to silence it.
And now his face is on the British 50-pound note. Statues, awards, people studying his work all over the world. He's an icon.
A reminder that brilliance can come from anywhere, and that fighting for what's right, for equality, it matters, because you never know who you might be holding back.
Alan Turing, a mind ahead of his time, a life full of triumph and tragedy. It's a story that makes you think, makes you feel, and most importantly, it makes you want to do better.
To build a world worthy of everyone's genius, no matter who they are.
Thanks for listening to Mythos AI. Stay tuned for more concise insights. And remember to hit the like button and subscribe for future episodes.